Wonderful. So folks from around the world, as you likely all know, on Wednesday, I like to reach out to someone in the communities of the world and just get their perspective on life, love, and happiness, and talk about either trading or psychology or the mental mindset of money. And who we have on our show today is someone that reached out to me and we connected on LinkedIn. And she has a really interesting background on just performance and the mindsets of successful athletes and winners. So we're going to talk to her a lot today about psychology and beliefs and thoughts, and have some really good deep diving questions. So if you wouldn't mind, Creed, introduce yourself and just tell everyone a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Creida Sheehy Kelly. I'm Irish, but I'm actually in Lisbon, Portugal at the moment. I'm living here now. So I'm a high performance psychologist, and I've been working in this area for about 12 years now. And so originally I studied sports psychology. So I did a master's in sport and exercise psychology, but performance psychology is basically the same as sports psychology. The principles are the same. So what I do is I coach people to optimize their performance from different areas by working on their mindset and their emotional control. And most of my career, I worked with professional athletes, but recently, well, relatively recently, about a year ago, I started working with traders. So someone actually came to me looking to optimize their trading performance, and it just really clicked. And the mindset that is required for trading is very similar to the mindset required for professional athletes. So there was a real natural kind of crossover. So I got really interested in that. And then I've been working with traders for the past year, helping people with their trading performance too.
That's too cool. That was really, really great. And what's interesting is when you mentioned the blend and the similarities between trading and a professional athlete. I speak with traders a lot that come from a background of they want to trade, they want to invest, they want to day trade, and they want to make money, and they want to, just grow their accounts. And naturally, that makes a lot of sense. But they forget that it is a profession, and it's very similar to me going out and trying to play cricket or, football or soccer or anything. I'm not a professional athlete. And so if I showed up and tried to play tennis and get paid $10,000 for a tournament in a weekend, I would get absolutely murdered. And it's very similar, I feel like, in trading, is because this is a profession where people spend their entire lives mastering this stuff. And if you show up on month one expecting just to win and kick the door down and get your goal, it's going to be a challenge, right?
So true. That's like 100%, because even when you think of the amount of work that goes into the technical side of trading, learning those skills, and then people aren't even aware that the mental side of it, really exists, or they're not aware of how important it is, and that you actually need to put in as much work on the mental side as the technical side. So when people go in with that expectation, even from a technical perspective of thinking, I'll pick this up and I'll be making millions in the next few months, that's just an unrealistic expectation. But then even when they start realizing on the technical side of things that that's not true, and that it takes so much work and putting in the effort and putting in the consistent work every day, and then they learn that actually the mindset side of things is so important as well, and there's work to do there. It's really only the people that are willing to put in that effort and to stay the course and to learn those things from the bottom up that are going to be successful. And it's really similar in sport, especially actually when you get talented youth athletes who maybe are coasting on talent for a while, like they're so naturally gifted that they don't actually understand that they need to put the work in to really get to the next level. And you'll see those people drop off, even if they get, semi-professional contracts or whatever. You often see them drop off in their early 20s because they don't want to put in the work that's required to, have a consistent career. So yeah, really similar.
Love it. Okay, so let's go into some mindset stuff. Why do traders and or professional athletes, why do they hate losing so much?
God, well, I don't think anyone likes losing, right? Well, I think if you're putting yourself in that arena, you have a competitive mindset, and you want to win. So if you're even exposing yourself to those risks, you probably are driven by a need to win. And often, this is probably jumping in very deep, but when people lose, if they they sometimes identify with the loss with like that it says something about their self-worth. So a lot of people, and I've seen this time and again in trading and in sport, that people actually are seeking validation from, you know, the markets or from winning on a pitch, and they have this huge drive to, you know, feel worthy and feel self-esteem, and they're channeling that into sport or trading. So it actually goes way beyond the discipline that they're in. It's, you know, they're driving for that win to kind of
Cool.
prove their worth as a person to themselves. So that's a really
Do you
deep
think that's
level.
subconscious, or is
Absolutely,
that?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So it, like, actually, yeah, I'm jumping right into the meat of it. But yeah, there's a lot of subconscious beliefs that people have that actually play out in their trading performance or their, you know, sports performance or whatever domain you're talking about. And they're the hardest things to change. So it'll show up. It'll look like something very, you know, kind of simple and straightforward. So someone has a fear of missing out and they're, you know, being overactive in the markets, or they're revenge trading because they have a run of trades that go against them and they want to kind of prove, you know, that they can master the market. But usually those simple behaviors that, you know, mess you up and have a negative impact on the P&L, they're often driven by subconscious beliefs. So they're quite hard to change, because until you actually make that link and you understand that it's coming from something much deeper, it's quite hard to change the behavior. Otherwise you're operating at like a surface level. So a huge amount of the work that I do with people is actually digging into, you know, the subconscious beliefs and patterns that are driving your behavior in the markets. But then what happens is when people start transforming that, they actually see benefits in other areas of their life. Because if you, you know, if you have a belief that's messing you up in the markets, you're going to also probably see that same belief pop up in other areas of your life and, you know, sabotage you. So it's actually really interesting. It's kind of like a whole transformation on a personal level and also on a performance level. So yeah, I think nobody likes to lose, but there's so much behind it. You could really talk about it for hours.
Yeah, you can. You can. So we're going to,
Yeah,
or at least for a little bit. And so when we're talking about the whole losing aspect, in your opinion, what advice do you give to either, let's just say professionals? Doesn't matter what sport you're in. I think trading can absolutely be a sport, but what advice do you give for the losing?
So it's really, really the focus that you need to have when, you know, in any performance domain is on the process. So that's the like optimal focus to have when you're in the middle of a football match, you know, soccer match, whatever. You know, you don't want to be thinking we're 3-1 down, you know, that's like everything's, we're going to lose, whatever. You want to be focused on, you know, I need to make this next pass as accurate as possible. I need to get up the pitch as quick as I can. So that's a process focus. And when you're focused on the outcome, so if you're trading and you're constantly looking at the P&L in a way that's not helping your process, then, you know, you're going to be putting a lot more pressure on yourself. And so by focusing on whether you're winning or losing when you're actually in the middle of executing, that's going to increase the likelihood of you losing. So it's depending on the person, you know, there can be lots of different reasons why people are on a losing streak or why they're not performing at their peak. Like, you know, and that's what we do. We dig into all of those different reasons at a personally tailored level with clients. But usually a very obvious and kind of straightforward thing that people can try and focus on straight away is to focus on the process more than the outcome. So for example, some clients would, and this might be standard in trading, I don't know, but people will kind of hide the P&L from themselves when they're actually in the middle of the trade, so that they're more focused on, you know, getting in at the right place and like sticking to their stops, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's hard,
So
but I do that as well. I try my best not to look at my P&L. I mean, it doesn't always work, but I try. It's my goal. Or I don't want it to be about the money. I want it to be about the process.
exactly. And there is a time and place for looking at the money. So, you know, when you're setting your goals for the year, like maybe you have income goals or whatever, that's an appropriate time to set targets. And maybe over, you know, a 3-month period, you might have we'd call it an outcome goal. So an outcome goal is something that's not necessarily in your control, but you're striving towards it, you know. So you can set those goals at that point, but you need to kind of know when to be focusing on it and when not to. And when you're actually in the middle of, you know, your trade, and you really don't want to be thinking about the P&L, because it's going to exacerbate all those tendencies towards either, you know, a fear of putting on risk because you don't want to lose money, or the revenge trading because you've just lost. It really exacerbates all of that. So that's a simple kind of quick tip for people, is whatever way that you can make that possible for you to try and not focus on the P&L and bring yourself more into the process. That should help your performance. But when I would work with clients, we would do that in a very structured way. So we'd understand exactly, why the person is looking at the P&L so much. And then we'd come up with, practical techniques to help them stop. So it's not as simple as just telling yourself, oh, don't look at it. There's lots of things that you can do to actually help you bring your focus more to the process. Are you still there, Jeremy? I don't know if I've lost you.
Shoot, sorry, I was on mute. I
Sorry.
apologize. Yeah, I just had like this really prophetic statement too.
Oh, no,
So my question that, and thank you. I think that's great advice. That's a really, really good step, at least in the right direction, because when you do it, it means and shows your brain that you're at least trying to focus in on that process, to really nail down the process. What's a way that a trader, again, or an athlete, someone who is professional in their craft, let's say they're doing well and they're doing okay. What's your advice or thoughts or opinions on how they can become even better?
Oh, okay, great question. I love that. So, well, one actually just linked to the last point is that it's equally as important to focus on the process, even if you're doing well. So it works both ways. You don't want to get kind of carried away by, oh, amazing, I'm winning all this money. I'm, like keeping the same structures and the same processes in place, whether you're winning and losing, is really important. But to get more into the idea of optimizing performance, and that's actually why I got into sports psychology. So I love psychology and I love, how the human mind works and, what drives our behavior. But I didn't want to go into clinical psychology and kind of focus on bringing people from a really negative space to neutral. I wanted to really help people optimize performance and get the absolute most out of themselves. And that's what performance psychology is about. So there is an element of, addressing challenges and things that aren't working, but there's also so much that you can do to improve your performance. So that's a massive topic, but actually a good way to start that process is to do a performance profile. So I'll try to explain that really quickly, just because it's a practical technique that people
totally.
use. So, and this applies the same. So whether you're an athlete or, an opera singer or a trader, I would do this same process at the start of coaching with people. So we actually break down performance, all the different factors that if you were a 10 out of 10 on all these factors, would combine, and the outcome of those would be peak performance. We literally map every single factor out. And we kind of put them under the heading of physical factors. So if you're an athlete, that column would probably be quite big. You'd have stuff like speed, core strength, whatever. But also for traders, you're going to have elements in that column. So, if you're exercising, you're going to be in a better mental state. You're going to be sharper, and you're going to feel better in yourself. So that's, you would put exercise in there in that column. So you have physical factors, mental factors, which is always very long considering we're working on the mindset side of things. So, factors like confidence, discipline, maybe reviewing your trades, your self-talk, all of that kind of stuff. Then you would have your technical and skill factors. So the actual, the nuts and bolts of trading and from the technical side of it. So maybe you have the quality of your fundamental analysis, whatever. And then you'd have your tactical factors and then your lifestyle. And it's really important. And this is something that people often don't pay enough attention to, especially outside of sport, because obviously like in sport, diet and hydration and things like that have a very obvious impact on performance, but they also do, in trading or in opera singing, aviation, whatever your domain you're talking about. So mapping out the lifestyle factors that impact your performance is really interesting. So sometimes you might have an item in there like sleep, and if somebody came to me and they rated themselves on their sleep where they're currently at, and they were a 2 out of 10, and they also wanted to work on confidence, they were a 5 out of 10 on confidence or whatever, sleep would be the first thing to look at. So there's some like fundamental lifestyle factors that if they're not optimal, then you're not going to be performing at your peak, even if you're confident.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point to bring up, that especially with trading and bringing it into that the professional light that it is, you do have to optimize your general life as well. Like your sleep and your diet and your hydration. I don't personally remember a time where I was very dehydrated trading, but I remember a few times where I was hungover trading a few years ago, and that kind of sucked.
That's honestly, we've actually, like, I've worked with clients on things like that where they have a rating of, you know, they literally rate their kind of physical state, and if they're hungover, they're to a certain level, they're not, you know, it's not in their best interest to trade.
Right.
So we literally formalize every single factor that could impact performance. But when you do it, when you map it out like that, it becomes like a jigsaw puzzle, and you can use that then to understand where the most impactful places are to start improving. So you can't work on everything at once. But if you do that exercise and you rate yourself out of 10 on everything where you're currently at, you know, a few things will jump out where you're like, actually, if I improve that one piece, you know, by a couple of percent, it would make a massive overall difference to my performance. Then you're starting to really understand how you can go from, God, I want to perform at my peak, to actually understanding how you can start practically making changes to do that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very valid point. And I think that's something that a lot of people will forget about because they'll focus only on trading. And I like to tell people at some point, you're going to know everything you're going to know about trading. Like you can't learn everything about trading because it's an endless source of information. You won't know everything. You won't know every strategy. You won't know every news story. You won't know every stock. Therefore, at some point, you got to learn yourself a lot more. So my question to you, Ms. Kelly, would be how would you advise or suggest that people learn a little bit more about their own psychology? What should they do themselves?
Oh, I love that. So yeah, I think self-awareness is the key to performing, you know, at your peak in any area. And it's also just so good for your own mental well-being and that. So it's understanding yourself better. The first place to start is to actually start, like, you know, mapping what's going on for you. So on a mental well-being side of things, which I'm a big believer that has a huge impact on performance, you know, because you can't, if you're, I don't know, fighting with a spouse or something, and that's going to impact your mood, and that's going to impact how you approach the markets, you know, so you kind of can't separate that side of things either. So things like journaling, you know, which might be quite unfamiliar to some people. Some people might do it already, but like actually writing down how you're feeling in a day and why you're feeling that way, even in bullet points, that's a great way to start actually connecting with yourself. So a lot of people are very disconnected to how they're feeling about things. And that massively impacts performance. If you know what your current mood is, then you can actually nearly preempt the tendency to take it out in the markets, you know. Another way to build up self-awareness is to say, create like a daily review template where you're actually rating the psychological factor side more, you know, than the technical side of things. So you can start rating your, say, how well you stuck to your process, how focused you were, etc. And then note down a few points about why that was. So that's a really useful exercise to start understanding yourself better and linking it to, you know, what's happening in your trading. So that could be like, maybe your focus was a 5, and then you note down that you only got 4 hours sleep. So there's a direct correlation. So you know that if you want to improve that, then you need to go look at your sleep routine. So from a technical perspective, I think that's a good way to go about it, is actually start mapping information and tracking the same stats over, you know, days or weeks, and you start to see patterns. So that's kind of the first place to start. But from the more emotional side of things, yeah, the journaling is really helpful. What else is there around that? I think journaling is probably the
Yeah,
best place to start with that.
that's hard.
Yeah, yeah, it is, but and I don't know, actually, I'd be really interested. I don't know if I can throw out a question, but I'm interested to know how many of the viewers or the people on this platform actually pay attention to that side of things, like the kind of mental well-being, emotions, you know, the softer side of things. Do people
Mm.
actually work on that, or
Yeah, let's
they
find
don't?
out. So
Yeah.
I can absolutely and honestly say I do not do it as much as I should. Well, let me rephrase. I don't journal it. I do try my best to be as self-aware as I can, as often as I can, when I'm trading and when I'm in the moment, try to figure out how I'm doing emotionally. But I don't journal that aspect of it, at least at this part of my career. I have before in the past, but I don't do it right now. But I think that's a phenomenal question. Dallas says 100% he does it. Logan does it every day. Joseph says, because of meditation and mindfulness, I constantly check my emotions. which again, I think it's phenomenal to do, and having a journal of it and tracking it. Do you find any electronic way of doing that that can kind of keep track of everything, and kind of apps that you use that are nice?
So I'm a old school. I write everything down, but
Sure.
no, there are a ton of apps out there, and particularly it's great that someone's mentioned mindfulness and meditation. So, and there's some great apps, Insight Timer, what else is out there? Headspace is a good one. So there's a lot of free apps even that you can use on that side of things. So mindfulness and meditation, and I know they're big buzzwords, and there's people are kind of becoming more familiar with those, but actually when you engage in meditation, you are quietening your mind down so that you can actually kind of hear yourself more. So even though you're not proactively journaling about your emotions, you're just stilling your mind so you can connect with yourself. And there's so much science behind the benefits of meditation and mindfulness. Like it is definitely proven to help performance. And what's really interesting is I worked with a professional rugby team in Ireland. So there's 4 professional rugby teams in Ireland, and I worked with Leinster Rugby. And a lot of the players who would be, the most macho, masculine, rugby playing people, a lot of them, or nearly, I would say, more than half the team would use Headspace and apps like that, mindfulness apps, because they found that it really helped performance. So they will do literally anything to improve performance, anything that works, even things like yoga and stuff like that. So they find that really helpful.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I get it. I can, and it's just like I said, it's hard. It's really hard. I'll read a text message that I got 2 or 3 days ago from a trader, and I won't read it verbatim, but I'll kind of just give the overall arching points. But specifically, he reached out and was saying that he is throwing in the towel, at least temporarily. He traded with me for a year and mentioned that he did a lot of things, took a lot of action, didn't get any results. And he's like, I'm going to go back to the drawing board. And I said, well, I get it. Totally understand. What results were you looking for? He's like, well, I wanted to double my account. I was like, okay, cool. Get it. What actions did you take? He was like, well, I traded. And I was like, yeah, that's obvious. But what other actions did you take? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, what other actions other than just trading? Like, what massive actions did you do to really figure out a way to transform not only your trading, but your life? Because if you want to become a profitable trader, if you want to become a profitable athlete, if you want to become a profitable at any profession, you're going to have to transform certain aspects of your life in a grandiose fashion. And I was talking to him about it, and more or less he simply said, I didn't take any massive action. I didn't do anything that was really impactful or anything that was outside of the normal realm of trading because it's hard and I lack discipline. What would your advice be for someone who is just struggling with the discipline aspect of it?
So that's really interesting, even to unpack that whole situation. So, because I think if you really want to be, performing at your peak and really hitting your potential and being at in the 1% or whatever it is of successful traders, you have to understand that it requires massive commitment and massive effort and taking action in lots of different directions. So, like you say, not just on the skill side of things, but actually on the mental side of things and even lifestyle, whatever. So when people are struggling with discipline, that sometimes going back to your why is a helpful thing to do. So if your why isn't strong enough, so you have to have a really strong reason for why you're trading, and not just I want to make money, but really fleshing that out and understanding, and I'm sure this is exactly, your area, the money mindset, but I want to make that money because I want to provide a better life for my kids. I want to, whatever your wider purpose is with it. Making that crystal clear gives you greater motivation to actually put in the work. So on one side of it, if you're struggling with discipline in terms of taking action to improve, that's at that kind of broad level, then really sitting down and figuring out your why and making it crystal clear will help, because the more intrinsically motivated you are, so that's the more that your motivation is coming from within you as opposed to somebody else telling you why you should be trading or why you should make money, the more likely you are to actually put in more work and be disciplined. If someone's struggling with discipline from a more technical level, like when they're actually in a trade and they're not sticking to their stops or something, that can go back to those ideas of the subconscious beliefs that are driving you and stuff. So there's no simple answer to, if you want to be more disciplined, do this. It kind of depends on how that lack of discipline is manifesting for you. But I think that's a really useful exercise just as a tip for people to do. And you might even have thought about it before, like, why am I trading? But to go back and revisit that and really flesh that out, nearly like a whole paragraph and a page of the reasons why you're doing this. And that can sort of help you when you're hitting those bad patches and you need to, that boost of motivation, and you need to just kind of stay the course and put in more work. It's useful to have that to go back to.
Love it. You mentioned something really fun in that statement. You talked about moving stops. Why do traders, like psychologically, why do they move their stops?
So I suppose they're chasing the win, right? So, or the more money or whatever. And again, this can be, ego reasons, so, or adrenaline. So actually that's a really interesting topic as well to talk about, is I found that a lot of traders have slightly similar mindsets, and that they're risk takers, and that's why they're drawn to this area. But adrenaline then can come into it. So if people are risk takers, they kind of, from a brain chemistry perspective, they can often be quite driven by like chemicals like dopamine and stuff like that. So they're actually getting a pleasure hit when they're making more money or when they're making more trades. So even the activity of trading and kind of engaging in that risk is rewarding to your brain if you're wired that way. So that can be some of it. So actually it can be like that you're in the short term getting, positive feedback and kind of pleasure from trading and the idea that you could make more money. So even that's, you're kind of substituting, or you're giving up your process in order to have more adrenaline, say. So that can be one side of it. But I think, it also comes back to those beliefs about what does it say if I lose this trade, what does that say about me as a person? I can't make mistakes, that's not acceptable. So I'm going to chase this to the end. So things like that, there's lots of different reasons, but they're kind of all falling into those broad categories.
That's an interesting one about just the acceptance of that. These saying, oh, I'm totally fine with I'm totally fine with losing, or I don't want to lose because of this. And that's something that has helped me a lot, is going through my own self reflections and psychology and trying to find out what I'm afraid of as it relates to losing and money. Because the money mindset and the money management and the linkages that we have to both money and winning and success and happiness and failure are all things that we have to explore at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's, again, like what you're describing there is an exercise in self-awareness. So you're actually sitting down and, articulating what your fears are. And once you start understanding what your fears are around the money side of things, then you can start changing things. So just going back to that self-awareness piece, the more that you can get stuff out of your head and onto paper and actually articulate it, the more information you have to work with, and the more you can you're empowered to change things then. But it is so interesting. I was talking to someone about money mindset recently, and we were talking about how people have a set point, and there's that idea of, even if you won the lotto, nearly in a year or two, people tend to go back to the set point that they were at before they won, because their mindset around money is the same. So it's really, if you want to be earning more money, dealing with your fears, your blocks around it, what it means to you on a kind of more like spiritual level, that's all really helpful to do. And sometimes people actually limit themselves. So I've worked with clients who and this happens in sport and trading, lots of different areas, where people have a fear of success, and nearly it's more common than a fear of failure at the root. People can actually feel comfortable in their smaller space, their comfort zone, where they're not making the money that they want, and they're used to kind of that feeling, and to actually expand and suddenly start winning and growing your bank account can actually threaten your current identity. So it's so important to explore all that in such depth that you're actually paving the way to allow yourself to grow as well.
Yeah, that's the big one, is allowing yourself to grow. Tell me more about that. What do, or how do people hold themselves back from growing more?
I think it's that thing about your comfort zone, really. So, if, and we build up our mindsets over years and we do it unconsciously. We learn mindsets from our parents, all of that. So we layer up all this stuff, and it becomes our comfort zone. So if we're used to, say, almost making it all the time and then never quite getting to our goals, well, that nearly becomes our identity, and that becomes a comfort zone for us because we're used to it. We know how to deal with that. We know how to deal with the disappointment of it, whatever. So when you actually start trying to grow past that, it's unfamiliar to you, and on a certain level, people kind of don't know what to expect. So sometimes that results in people engaging in self-sabotage, not consciously at all, but just doing things that will actually keep them in their comfort zone. So again, in order to be able to expand past that, you need to understand what your comfort zone is and what's holding you back. So if you understand that from a more emotional level first, then you can look at your behaviors and say, okay, what am I doing that's sabotaging myself? And then you can start transforming those and then kind of growing past that. But it's really about getting comfortable with moving outside of your comfort zone.
This is going to sound like an obvious question. How do people get out of their comfort zone?
Yeah. So, well, the first part of it is self-awareness. So understanding, one, that you're in one, that's fundamental. Like, lots of people never even give the topic any thought. So maybe just even stopping and sort of asking yourself, like, what is my comfort zone and where are the limits that I grow to? So like maybe there's a financial limit in terms of a salary that you've never moved, beyond, or maybe in relationships, there's a limit of time that your relationships last or whatever. So really question yourself and ask, in every different area of your life, is there a point that you haven't been able to move past? And usually, we might see patterns, especially like say patterns in relationships that repeat. Well, that's probably an indication that there's a block there at some point that you can't move past into, move outside of your comfort zone. So that's a helpful way to do it, is to actually build that self-awareness and map out what your comfort zone might look like. And then to push past it, even setting like one small task or goal in each life area that you set yourself, and that it doesn't have to be a massive jump. If you're not comfortable public speaking, it's not that you set a goal to go and do a TEDx talk or whatever.
Yeah.
But maybe you to a Toastmasters class, or maybe you challenge yourself to do a 30-second live video on Instagram, so actually pushing yourself and setting goals to start step by step moving past it is really good, because then as you take each small step outside of it, you're building confidence and you're actually building a pathway to, the much bigger growth. So you don't have to throw yourself out of it and, into an abyss. You actually kind of build it up step by step. But you have to do it consciously and proactively, and you build your confidence as you do it. You get more used to taking risks, and, it can be exciting then to be outside of your comfort zone instead of scary.
I think that's a really good point, because a lot of people, and I've done it before too, numerous times, where I'll try to get out of my comfort zone and I'll do this ridiculous thing that I'm never going to do, and I will sit there and go, well, I'm not going to, if I want to get stronger and I currently am in the gym and I bench press 190 pounds, like I'm not going to do 400 pounds in the next 2 months.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will do that naturally because they just like, well, let me shake it up and let me do something big. I'm gonna get out of my comfort zone. I'm gonna do this. And they come up with this massive thing. And I generally like to say it's a lot easier just to take the smallest, tiniest step out of your comfort zone and start there rather than trying to go too huge.
So true. Like that's definitely the way to approach it, for sure. And when people set those massive goals, they're nearly like, that's nearly an act of self-sabotage in itself, because if you set it so big, you're setting the benchmark so big that you're actually setting yourself up to fail. Whereas it's kind of more boring and more tedious to set this much smaller steps and consistently hit them. But that's what's going to bring results. And I think that's key to understand across all of, performance psychology and optimizing performance. The actual process of doing it isn't, it can be tedious, and it requires, putting in the work when you don't feel like it. Like for athletes, that's turning up to training in the, lashing rain and the muck and everything in the
Oh,
winter,
yeah.
so that it pays off at championship time in the summer. Or, it's much less exciting, but it's actually what brings results. So if you're really serious about getting the best out of yourself, you kind of have to commit to the hard slog and the idea that the process itself isn't shiny and exciting as much as, the taking like that, I don't know, I'll go do a TEDx talk, or I'll bench press whatever in the gym. That's a lot more exciting and it feeds the ego. But the smaller step of, I'm going to increase my weights across all my different exercises in the gym by, 5 kilos, like that's not as exciting. But actually, if you start in that path, that's what's going to bring you to the ultimate goal.
That consistency, that's the challenge. That's the hard part. And because it gets hard, there will
Yeah.
be always a point. It doesn't matter if let's say you do one push-up a day, just one push-up every single day. Day 97, you're going to forget, or it'll not come across your mind, or something will happen and your day will just progress and you'll just kind of just lose sight of it. How do we keep the consistent willpower to stay consistent in something like that?
So goal setting is really important for that. And again, it sounds very straightforward, but it's so important. Like, because often people will set goals, but they kind of set them in their head, or they're tracking them in their head. But there's actually science behind the idea that if you track goals, like you write them down and you actually like tick them off and write down your progress, that you're much more likely to see something through. And so you can set goals, you can have process goals that are to do with things that you're doing in your day. So maybe it is that I'm going to turn up to the gym 3 times this week or whatever. Then you can set performance goals. So maybe you're tracking whatever weights you're lifting in the gym. And then you can have your outcome goals, which, are the much kind of bigger ones that you're working towards. But it's actually about tracking data. Again, sounds very kind of boring, but that's what will actually help you to see the results as you go along, and then the results build your confidence and motivation. So you need to be able to see your day-to-day progress in order to actually stay motivated to stick with the whole program. And when you do that in a formal way, so you're actually tracking your data, that is much more likely to keep you feeling motivated and keep you actually, consistent with the process.
Yeah, seeing the results is something that can definitely help. And in trading, it's one of those things that can be frustrating because you can see results, but you see them so fast. And for some people, it can be scary because, well, I mean, it can be scary for me. It can be scary for anyone. If you're trading is one of those very few professions where you can see results instantaneously. Poker, maybe as well, because you can play online. But tennis, for example, you can't just go out and have a match with someone instantaneously and lose 4 grand.
Yeah.
Or bowling or anything. You can't do that. So, but in trading, you can sit down in front of the computer, be having a bad day without knowing it, pull up the charts, pull up the broker, press a few buttons the wrong way, and boom, you're down 4 grand, and it just kind of can start spiraling from there. What's your take on how to help control those instances when you get that immediate feedback and that immediate results and they're not good?
So I think that goes back to what we were speaking about earlier in terms of having techniques to help you to focus on the process. So I completely get what you're saying, and it means that it's a performance domain where pressure is heightened. So say trading, maybe like air traffic controllers, they make a mistake, a plane goes down like that, and any kind of discipline like that where split-second decisions can make or break something significant for you. It means that there's more pressure on you. So that means that your ability to deal with that pressure needs to be really high. So a CEO in a more kind of 9 to 5 job is dealing with pressure, but it's not at the same level of a split-second decision can absolutely mess things up, or really make your career. So the two sides of it are understanding how pressure affects you. And there's different ways that it even affects like everybody's thinking. So that idea of paralysis by analysis and stuff, if you feel more under pressure, you're more likely to overanalyze things. And, you know, understanding how pressure impacts you and then having strategies in place to help buffer against that is really helpful. And then also, again, focusing on the process, because at the end of the day, it's still performance, you know, because the consequences are higher, the process is still the same. All the science still applies in the same way. It's just that you need to, there's an additional need to be even better at dealing with pressure, I would say.
Yeah, agreed. That's the challenge, but it's a fun challenge. Where can people get a hold of you and gain more information and insight from you?
Yeah, so I have my website. It's www.credeperformance.com. So that's CREDE performance.com. So there's information there on, you know, the coaching programs that I offer. So I do intensive coaching, so it's completely bespoke, and you know, it's as much one-to-one coaching as you need to reach your goals over an 8-week period. So I don't take on loads of clients at any one time because I really, you know, want to help transform people's trading and their lives. So that's what I do on the coaching side of things. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn, so that's a good place to reach me. So feel free to shoot me a message there. And I think I'm the only Creative She Kelly on LinkedIn, so it should be easy enough to find.
Yeah, that's where you and I connected. We had one person who wrote in a good question. He said, if someone feels like they often choke under pressure, can that be fixed in time, or is it based psychology? Asking for a friend.
No, a million. Like, I actually did my master's research on that, my thesis, choking under pressure. So no, absolutely, that's not something you're born with, and you know, it's part of your personality. That's 100% something, like a skill that you can, or a set of skills that you can learn to address that. And you know, it's just about understanding why it's happening, and that can look different for different people, and then putting strategies in place to overcome it. So that's 1,000,000%, like, that would be one of the most common things that I would deal with in performance psychology and coaching people across all different disciplines.
Yep, got it. Dallas says, coming from a guy who never dealt with anxiety for 25 years, I realized my obsession with sports and competing parallels to my devotion to trading and winning. They both also have avenues to escape that can deflect from newfound anxieties. What are some ways to cope rather than diving into trading and working, or out watching and playing sports as it relates to anxiety, I think?
So that's really insightful and a really good comment. And I think that's also true. Like, lots of people have coping mechanisms that they use where they're actually avoiding dealing with you know, the root emotions. And that can look, you know, on the surface, trading or sports looks like a healthy coping mechanism, but at a certain point, if you're doing anything that's a mechanism to avoid how you're feeling, or directly kind of tackling how you're feeling, then obviously that's something that you need to pull back on a little bit. So the best way really to kind of address that is building that self-awareness and building that emotional intelligence. So understanding, you know, what it is that's driving your anxiety. There's usually root cause behind it, and understanding what triggers it, what makes it worse. So maybe specific environments make it worse, or if you're, you know, drinking too much coffee, or, and I'm not saying that in a, you know, minimizing it way, but just there's lots of different lifestyle things that can also feed into anxiety. But just really getting a greater understanding of where the anxiety is coming from, and being more in touch with your emotions and kind of developing that emotional intelligence is the best way to start unlocking it for you. So you can use distraction techniques, but they're not solving the actual core issue. So the more that you can actually sit, even though it's uncomfortable, with the core issue and address those head on, then you know, you're not going to need those distraction strategies as much. And that can be, you know, going to a therapist, or it can be doing that kind of self-development work that we were talking about, if it's, you know, meditation or journaling and things like that. So all those strategies can help. And if it is very prominent for you, and you know, it's something that's really holding you back, then definitely talking to a therapist or counselor is a good way forward. And it's pretty much like, it's a similar process to what I'm doing with people from a performance perspective. It's all about just building that understanding of yourself and then having some strategies to cope with it.
Huge. Very good stuff. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And this was really great. I appreciate you being here. I know you and I kind of spoke on the phone once and then I threw you into the fire.
Yeah,
But
no, I love this. Sure, performance under pressure, right? That's
that's it. That's
my
it.
coaches. I've got to be able to do it. So
I love it. I think this is fantastic. And I appreciate you sharing your website with us. I'll make sure to put that in the description box. If anybody wants to reach out, feel free to connect with you. You said you live in Portugal right now, right?
yeah, I've moved. So I was living in Dublin, but I've just actually officially become resident today. So yeah, I'm here for the sunshine.
Well, thank you
Um,
so much. I really appreciate it. It's been an honor spending some time with you today and getting a lot of insight and knowledge from your expertise and your background. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. And if anyone has any questions, they can follow up on LinkedIn and just drop me a message. I'd be happy to answer them. So thanks so much, Jeremy, for having me, and
Oh
really
yeah,
enjoyed that.
absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah, folks. So that's the thing is, feel free to connect with anyone. You'll never run out of opportunities and people that know more about other elements of specialties than you do. There is an abundance of phenomenal human beings out there to help you grow and learn and enrich lives and improve both your body and your mind. And again, for me as a trader, as a professional trader, as someone who loves this craft, I do understand that there is only at some point so much you can learn. And from there, it does all come down to performance internally and optimizing that. So thank you, Critic, for being here. I appreciate it. And for those of you who are listening, it always means the world to me that you are helping me with my mission to enrich lives. I will see all of you at 5 p.m. Eastern for Energy Wednesday. And for those who were trading with us today, thank you. I appreciate your time. And until next time, love life, live life, and trade it. I'll see you guys later. Bye.